very favorite sayings is from the ancient philosopher Heraclitus. Heraclitus once said, "There is nothing permanent except for change." And I would encourage you, as we go throughout this program today, to be thinking about what's changing in your organization, what's changing in your team, what's changing in the dynamics of how you solve problems, the staffing changes. You might have contract changes, budget changes. There may be changes in policies. There may be changes in equipment or technology. Change often happens in real small doses, and it also can happen in really large doses. But regardless, change can throw people for a bit of a loop. So as we are going through today's content, I would encourage you to be thinking about what's changing in your organization, what's changing on your team, and also to be asking yourself this powerful question. And this question is so important, I highly recommend you write it down. And this question is, how will this work for me? I'm going to repeat that because it's oh so powerful. How will this work for me? Notice I emphasize the word how in this question, because if I were to simply encourage you to be asking yourself, will this work for me? Your brain's architecture would actually work against you. Our brains don't like change. Our brains like to keep going on the path of least resistance. In fact, sometimes we like to think of our brains as being lazy. I mean, it tends to go and do things the way it's always gone and done things. That's what it likes. That's what habit becomes. That's why habit is so tempting and so alluring, is because it's the easiest neural pathway for our brain. So what happens when we ask a question such as, will this work for me? Anytime we are learning something new or being given new information, our brain really doesn't want to have to work any harder. And so it will by default often say, nah, that won't work. It triggers a lot of pushback or resistance. So when we say, will this work for me? We make it really easy for our brain to dismiss what we're talking about as not necessary, superfluous, not important, won't work, doesn't apply to us, whatever that pushback might be. The moment we change it to, how will this work for me? And that's why I encourage you to write this down. Maybe even write the word how really big or underline it. How will this work for me? A couple of things happen. First of all, we're using what is known as the presumptive positive, meaning we presume this is going to work. You're going to be presuming that the tools, tips, and techniques that I share with you today will help you be a better leader during change. So it's not a question of if it's going to work. It's a question of how. And that frees you up to apply, to take the tools, tips, and techniques that I'm sharing with you and put them into practice. And you might actually find yourself tweaking them or adjusting them or adapting them to fit your needs or your situation. And of course, when we ask how will this work, it opens up our mind and we can see areas of opportunity to apply these tools, tips, and techniques, areas of opportunity that might not be readily available if we didn't have this guiding question in our head. So one of my pieces of encouragement to you today is to be asking yourself consistently, how will this work for me? And as I mentioned, change really is inevitable, and it happens, but it causes a lot of stress. It causes a lot of people to struggle with all sorts of different emotions. Some people become overwhelmed. Some people shut down. Some people get angry or hostile. Some people get really resistant or defensive. Change can be very difficult on a team as well, because then you take the individual responses of people being frustrated or disillusioned or angry or upset or confused, and it creates a bit of a group culture of we don't like this and this is going to be hard. So change can be very challenging to navigate as a leader, and yet it's inevitable. It's inevitable. So I applaud you for participating in today's event today because, that was redundant, wasn't it? Today's event today. I applaud you for participating in this event today because you're going to be able to learn some new ways that you can lead through change. Now, what's important to recognize, by the way, is that everyone who's participating today is a leader. regardless of whether you have formal management or leadership responsibilities. You don't have to be the CEO or the supervisor to be in a leadership role. Anyone who has the motivation and the desire to improve and become more skilled at something like change management is most likely seen as a leader within their organization. A leadership is not a job title. It's not a job title. It's a mindset. So I'm going to assume that everyone participating here has that leadership mindset. I'm also going to assume that many of you have what we would call formal leadership responsibilities. You may actually be a manager. You actually may be a supervisor, or maybe even sit in the C-suite. These tools will apply whether you are in a senior level leadership position, an entry level leadership position, or you are simply functioning in a leadership role without the title. One of the tools that will help you gain some insight into how to better manage change is to also be thinking about how you're going to take notes during this process. Now, let me explain the note-taking process, and then I'm going to encourage you to see how this can apply as a change management tool as well. This is what I call the start, stop, continue approach to learning. Anytime you're in a process like this, I encourage people to be listening for those things they want to start doing, those tools, tips, and techniques that they believe will assist them. Anything that makes you think, I could do that, or, oh, I didn't know that, I want to try that, or, oh, that might work for me, or I can see how this will work. Anything that strikes your fancy or seems intriguing to you, I would highly recommend you take notes on and maybe head it under a column labeled Start. So keep track, take notes of those things that as a result of participating today, you want to start doing. And of course, I'm going to call certain things starts. However, please don't wait for me to call something a start. If you hear something intriguing and you think to yourself, oh, I like that, or that will work for me, or this really is powerful. If you hear something that's intriguing to you and I don't call it a start, by all means, write it down. However, like I said, some things I will actually call starts. And many of the things that I call starts for you might not really be starts. For you, they might actually be continues. I think one of the biggest benefits of participating in an event like this is figuring out you're doing some things right. Having that aha of, oh yeah, I'm doing that right. That's something I want to continue. So perhaps it's something you learned in a previous position. Perhaps it is something that you used to do a long time ago. Or perhaps it's something that you're doing, however, you may not be doing it as often or as much of as you could. Those are things that you want to continue to do. It's always nice to have a reminder that you're doing things right. And then there are those things you want to stop doing. Some behaviors that we might be engaging that make it more difficult to survive and thrive during changing times. We might be sabotaging our own success as a leader. We might be sabotaging our team's success because of things that we are saying or things that we are doing. So we want to be aware and be on the hunt for those things to stop doing. I will tell you that when we think about start, stop, continues, it's the stops that are the hardest, because we have to break a habit or choose to do something different than we've always been doing.